Chapter 15, Raving Mad. Carlton's never seen so much money. Black bin bags full of the stuff. Week after week, the rave scene was relieving Britain's youth of millions of pounds of their hard-earned cash and provided him and the boys with the most lucrative mining job that they'd ever had. It was a scam of the century, money for old rope. As Carlton's already said, he was in at the start of it. As old warehouses, empty factories, anything with a roof and four walls, even fields beside the M25 were being commandeered for the weekend. Kids flocking in by the thousand, the bow ties and black jackets were left in a wardrobe as rave party organisers paid them to look cool in jeans and bomber jackets as they helped them pile up the cash from £10 to £20 a time door receipts to sales of soft drinks at rip-off prices. Plus, of course, the rake-off from the real earner, the tablets. Carlton thought at first ecstasy was harmless, fun and very profitable. The old notion of £50 for a night's worth, tangling with a load of drunks at a disco, was out the window. Now they were on £250 a night and rising. They were on percentages of the profits, they were on bungs from the e-dealers, they were loaded. And they rarely had to lift a finger in anger as the kids were too busy dancing the night away to acid house music and strobe lights. Full of love, full of peace for all mankind. They weren't really needed to keep the kids in order, but to keep the cash intact, to make sure some scabby bastards weren't about to burst in and grab it from them. Organised crime was very quick to take an interest in the rave scene's rich rewards. This was great stuff. You didn't have to pay for a venue, you didn't need a licence, you could charge £2 for a bottle of water that cost 25 pence, and you could summon the kids to the secret rendezvous through a network of coded phone messages and pirate radio stations. All the intrigue that had people fighting to give you money for a piece of the action like no other fad before. In 1988, when the bandwagon started rolling, Carlton honestly thought it was a craze that might fizzle out within a couple of years, and Carlton decided to fill his boots with the easy money while it lasted. Then he wanted a new car. She always fancied a snazzy four-wheel drive Suzuki Jeep. Right, Carlton said one birthday, I'm just popping out to get you a box of chocolates, babe. She did not look happy. Carlton drove over to Motor Point in Romford, wandered about for 20 minutes, looking at the cars, without anybody taking much notice. Carlton was in jeans, flying jacket, boots, not the sort of bloke who might just happen to have £14,000 in notes in a carrier bag in his motor. He saw the box of Herbie Hyde's old four-wheel drive automatic with wild wheels, all the biz, but it wasn't ready to go. He needed something he could drive off the forecourt, right there, right then, leave his car and pick it up later. Then Carlton saw the perfect model, a little cracker. I'll take that one, Carlton said. How would you like to pay, sir? Cash, Carlton said. Well, suddenly he got three of them buzzing round him. Take a seat. Would you like a cup of coffee, sir? If he'd had a shit, one of them would have definitely wiped his ass. What a difference a wedge of red is made. Carlton handed over the £7,800 asking price, less a little discount for cash, and he drove home in a graphite grey Suzuki and called out to the kids, "Where's Mum? Can you tell her her birthday present's outside?" Then he was upstairs. "What? What's going on?" she said. "Look out the window." Her face was a picture. A couple of months later, they bought out a brand new Suzuki Bushwhacker Jeep, a special edition in black with roll bars, big wheels, running boards. It was his dream motor. So Carlton decided to sell the first motor to a mate and buy a new one. When Carlton arrived at the dealers this time, they were all over him like a rash. "How are you, Mr. Leach? How lovely to see you again." "I want to buy the new Bushwhacker," Carlton said. "Will that be cash?" Need to have asked. Carlton negotiated an £800 discount for cash, then pulled out nearly £16,000 out of his bag and stacked it on the desk. That was the moment Carlton really felt like he'd arrived. Bit of muscle, bit of villainy, bit of this, bit of that. Bish bosh bosh, the dosh was rolling in. Seemed easy then, but where's it all gone now? One thing Carlton knows is that nowadays, if if you went into a car dealer's and dumped £16,000 in cash on the counter, you'd definitely be getting a tug from the old bill pretty quick. In the good old days, if you were a face around the East End, they'd expect you to have a nice few readies on you. And they'd actually know better than to grass you up to the old bill. What the rave scene, or the ecstasy scene, he supposed, to be more accurate, did do better than any politically correct sociologist could ever hope to achieve, was to break down barriers, be it race, territory, or sexuality. It became as near the global village philosophy as was possible, where people from any part of the world, any colour, with any sexual preference, were all genuinely on an identical level. It's a shame it all turned out to be a chemically induced illusion that eventually claimed so many young lives. Carlton was in an acid house club called Pushka one night when he got chatting to this black guy at the bar. It was a night off for him, away from the doors, and Carlton was just out to relax and enjoy himself amongst a new crowd of people. He got chatting to this guy and they got on great. They talked about football, music, all sorts. Carlton bought a drink for them, he bought a drink for them. What Carlton had failed to pick on was the fact that he was gay. Not that it mattered when it came to it. Two fellas just having a beer together. There was a little bit of softness there, but Carlton thought he was maybe just a bit arty. It was that sort of club. He said, would Carlton like to meet his girlfriend? Sure he would. He called her over from one of the tables where she was sitting with a friend. Carlton honestly thought it was Naomi Campbell, the model. She was beautiful and elegant and walked like a top model. This is Celeste, said his new pal. Hello, I'm Carlton, Carlton said, shaking her hand. Pleased to meet you, she said. Well, the voice wouldn't have been out of place on a building site. She was actually a transvestite who had managed to convert everything except the growling voice from male to she-male. She's been in magazines, said his new friend. He twigged that he was on for more than a beer, that he fancied a bit of a bruiser between the sheets. So he started squeezing him with his eyes in that way that some people have when they're trying to make you like them, all sort of cosy but intense. Well, Carlton started to get a little bit paranoid. He realised that all the people around him were gay. He was aware of lots of eyes on him. Did they think Carlton was gay too? Out for a pick-up for the night? Little cheeky takeaway? As he said, someone being gay is not a problem. But now it was getting scary. Carlton was muscled up, tattooed and wearing a vest, so he supposed it was his fault for looking like someone from the village people. Fortunately, he was with his girlfriend Lynn, but she was sitting at a table on the other side of the room. About half the club were transvestites, very attractive ones at that, and it was impossible to tell who was who, but he knew that he'd become the centre of attraction. Carlton walked over to Lynn. I really need to go to the loo, sweetheart, Carlton told her. Will you come with me? He gets a tap on the shoulder. Why don't you come with me? Carlton was certain that his new friend was about to make a move on him, and frankly, he didn't know how the fuck he was going to handle it without knocking the bloke out cold, and he didn't want to do that. So Carlton Leach, this big hard man, started walking out through the club, which he must say was a blinding place full of interesting, colourful people, clutching the hand of his girlfriend like a naughty boy and wanting to shout out, I'm not gay! It was a long walk through that club, and by the time they neared the toilets, Carlton had about 10 transvestites walking behind him, beside him, all around him, and his bottle was beginning to go. Give him 20 or 30 tough geezers, causing a ruck in a club, and he'd be in his element sorting it out. But this, Carlton was quivering like jelly. Then one of the transsexuals grabbed his balls. Carlton didn't know whether to laugh or cry. His first thought was to bang him out. Not bang one out, bang him out. Any self-respecting East End villain would have banged him out. Instead, Carlton just sort of laughed it off, pretended it didn't happen, because he just didn't know what to do. I mean, this is a first-time situation that another man had grabbed his balls, so he was lost for words. Then everyone started laughing, and it was cool again. Later on, Carlton got a call from the manager's office and was offered door work there. Pushka had a few problems, some involving anti-gay people, and they'd been looking for the right security outfit. They reckon quite literally that he got the balls for it. He's never bonded with anyone as well as he did with a pop singer Debbie Harry from Blondie. She came into the Ministry of Sound one night between her retirement and her comeback, and though she hadn't been in the limelight much for a while, he recognised her immediately. He actually had a right thing for Debbie Harry, had done for years. He got all her records, and Carlton seeing her was like a big kid. He walked her through the club, got her a table, and just had to ask her for an autograph. It's for my daughter Carly, Carlton said, but really, it was for him. Apart from being a big fan of her singing, he admired the fact that she'd put her own career on hold to look after her husband Chris when he became ill and could no longer play the guitar. "How is Chris?" Carlton asked her. She seemed quite amazed at his concern. She said, "You know, you were the first person, apart from the close family and friends, to ask about Chris. Thank you. He's doing okay." She got hold of his hand and squeezed it, and she just kept hold of it. Like Carlton was a long-lost friend she suddenly found again. He was knocked out. Here was Carlton standing, holding the hand of his pin-up idol and talking like personal stuff with her for nearly 3/4 of an hour. He's never been in awe of famous people, and he's met a lot around the clubs, but that night, Carlton just melted. When she gave him a kiss and cuddle as she left, he was over the moon. He was plain old, down-to-earth Carlton the bouncer. She was a pop star. But that night, for whatever reason, they just connected. It was one of those rare, magical moments in the muscle game. As Carlton was driving home in the early hours of the next morning, he had a mile-wide grin right across his face. He thought he'd go in and wake Carly up and say, "Hey Carly, I've got Debbie Harry's autograph for you." Then Carlton thought she probably wouldn't even fucking know who Debbie Harry was. And anyway, this is a special one, and he thinks, you know what, I was going to tuck it away somewhere safe for me, and I've still got it to this day. A lot of people from showbiz like to get to know the doorman at whatever club they go to. Steve McFadden, or Screen Hardman, Phil Mitchell from EastEnders, as TV soap fans will know him, and most of the cast from EastEnders are particularly friendly when they're out for the night. I suppose being the sort of show it is, and the cast being the sort of people they are, they can identify with the head doorman. After all, Carlton always felt he was playing a leading role in his own special production of Muscle for Hire that wouldn't have been amiss in any episode of EastEnders. He was loving it, Mr. Big Shot on the club scene, plenty of cash, cars, motorbikes, quality clothes, like half a dozen £1,000 suits hanging in the wardrobe that he never wore, a black leather jacket he bought for £1,600 and gave away the next day. Carlton always seemed to be in demand, hobnobbing with the rich and famous night after night. He thought it would never end. He was happy to treat his whole team for breakfast each morning after they finished at one of the clubs, or take friends and family out for meals and pay the tab of £500 or £600 a time. Then people started taking the piss and ordering champagne at £50 a bottle. People started turning up at his house out of the blue. "Oh, Carlton, I'm in a bit of trouble. You couldn't lend me £3,000, could you? I'll pay it back next week." Never saw it again. Then someone else wanted money for the kid or something, you know. He couldn't even remember what it was. He gave him £1,250. Never saw that either. He never really thought about it. These were friends and he thought they were there for him. They do say a fool and his money are soon parted, and he'd become a soft touch for everyone. For example, he'd give a barbecue, you know, free booze, free food, free gear for anyone who wanted it. And they'd come in their dozens. If the kids were there, he'd hire bouncy castles and discos to keep them happy. His parties were a little bit like a mafia convention, or Rottweilers at play. They might have up to 50 great beefcakes from the muscle business there, with the wives and kids, big hugs and kisses when they arrived and when they left, with the blokes giving him all the shit in between, saying how they loved him, how they would always be loyal to him, how they would kill for him, die for him. They surrounded him, smothered him, told him all night all the things that he wanted to hear. "You are the man, Carlton. You are the man. You've got the top firm. Respect, respect." You then start believing your own publicity, losing touch with reality, really thinking you are some sort of all-powerful Godfather figure. In his mind, Carlton was that godfather with all these people depending on him, but he was actually living in a goldfish bowl and he couldn't see where he was swimming. Carlton needed to be outside looking in to realise what a phony world it had become. The stark reality of that fact was really rammed home when Carlton lost the security contract at the Ministry of Sound in 1992. The bubble burst in spectacular fashion and all that easy money dried up. So did most of his so-called friendships. The promises of loyalty as fragile as eggshells. It hit his ego big time. The Ministry was now the top rave venue in London and it was his domain, his kingdom, his whole life and of course his main earner. Carlton was shattered at losing the contract. He was also gutted by the murder of Tony Tucker, Pat Tate and Craig Rolfe. With Tony's death having been so high profile, with stories running the media week after week, he was under the microscope. As far as the police were concerned, every move he made was covered, so Carlton couldn't get involved in any other work, straight or dodgy, and the cash soon started to evaporate. He was being watched round the clock, and he knew he was being watched, so he had to keep his nose very clean. He knew he had to sever all the links with the drug barons who had been paying him so handsomely over the years for allowing them to ply their trade. The death of Leah Betts and the evocative image of her on her deathbed with her parents' emotional pleas for helping catching the drug dealers who supplied her birthday ecstasy pills was preying on his mind. Carlton knew Tony had the daughter Raquel's in Basildon where she bought her pills, and he knew he was being tarred with the same brush. Evil, ruthless, uncaring drug dealer. He wasn't. Believe him, he wasn't. Carlton had no connection with Raquel's, apart from knowing Tony and some of the guys who ran the security there. He did care about the people around him. He did care about the kids in the clubs, but he got into the ecstasy scene genuinely believing that this was something for the greater good of humankind. That this was a solution to all the tension, the hatred, the hostility that affected mankind. How stupid and naive. How crass. Carlton was trapped by the easy lure of money. Trapped by the belief that what he did, what he was somehow important. How transparent that all looks now. Where are all those people who had their snouts in the trough year after year? People who were trusted and he believed in. They weren't there for Carlton Leach. They were there for what they could get. Will those favours he gave willingly ever be returned? Not a snowball's chance in hell. Okay, he's pretty much on his own now, apart from Kelly and a few close friends and family. But Carlton reckons he's a better person for it. He can now see exactly where he was heading, and there were only two routes, prison or death. When the money was rolling in, he was planning ahead big time. He was talking in millions from drugs and violence. He certainly would have become a truly horrible person, detestable. He thinks now that flash git he'd become, his close friends, the ones who matter now, have said to him, Carlton, you changed for a while and you were not nice at all. We thought we'd lost you forever. You were so involved in all this shit. What Carlton regretted most of all is not thinking about his kids, not making provisions for their future. If he'd got half his brain in gear, he should have been putting all that £800 and £1,000 meals and drinks money into a saving account for the kids to give them a bit of a chance in life. But it was always live for today, there's plenty more for tomorrow. And Carlton was on a roll at the heart of the drugs trade. You know, he was involved in all sorts of villainy. And if he needed £500, he could phone up someone, get a bit of graft, earn himself a monkey. When they needed to pay the rent on Lynn's flat, he'd pick up the phone, make a call, do a job with someone, and earn himself £1,000. That's how easy it was. When you are living in that brainwashed environment, it's a fantasy land. Nothing is real. Nothing lasts. Most of the people in that world are sheep. There are not many who will actually stand alone. They'll be in that corner with those particular villains, that champagne, those birds, that Charlie, because that's the corner to be in. Go with the flow while the going's good. It's when the bubble bursts that you realise it's all illusion, it's all bollocks. Where are the sheep now? They've all got fucking foot and mouth disease, or they're on a fucking hill going meh, meh. The rave scene has left him with a couple of drugs convictions on his form sheet, along with a little bit of violence from his soccer days. Carlton was a dealer, he swears, but he did use these for the reason he explained, and Carlton did once get caught in possession of ecstasy tablets. This happened when they were doing security at the raves. They often popped an E or two to put them in a good mood so that they'd be as chilled as everyone else. He used to get them for all the boys, either as freebies from some grateful dealer or he'd buy them at a heavily discounted rate. One night, they were doing security at a Riverside warehouse in East London, and he got 20 or so E's, which he intended to give to his personal friends later. But someone had tipped off the police. When they arrived, the whole place was in darkness. Carlton actually thought that was a bit odd because they knew the organisers would have been there setting everything up, putting up the lights, putting in the speakers and what have you. He knew something was wrong, but too late. Before they could turn around and make a bolt for it, the police lights all came on and cops were everywhere. Carlton put the packet of pills under his foot. Then a big, hairy-ass copper was asking, "Where are you going?" "Well, we're going to a rave, officer. There's a party at the warehouse." The police must have seen that they were all lumps, not the average rave scene participants. And they got a few tools of the trade with them, a pickaxe handle, lump of wood, etc. "Oh, these are from work," Carlton said. "I'm a carpenter." "Oh yeah? Right. Well, get your trousers and pants down because we're going to search you. Let's have a little look in your shoe." And that was it. He felt inside and under his boot and found the E's. Carlton was taken to a police station in North London and questioned for hours. He told the cops that he wasn't dealing and he only bought the drugs for personal use for him and his mates, and hadn't intended making a penny on them. The police charged him with possessing ecstasy with intent to supply. Under the drug laws, if you give someone a tablet or a piece of hash or whatever, you are intending to supply. He didn't want to plead guilty to supplying because that would officially make him a drug dealer on his police record and on his passport. Holidays in America would be out the window. Worst of all, Carlton knew it was likely to bring him a prison sentence. After numerous appearances at magistrates' court, Carlton was committed to the Crown Court and by then had been persuaded that it would be in his best interests to plead guilty to the supply charge. He got slaughtered by the judge. You would think he was the King of Colombia or the boss of some gangland cartel. He looked at him with a face like thunder and said he was remanding him for a month with a view to handing out a custodial sentence. Carlton wasn't scared of doing a bit of porridge, but he wasn't exactly looking forward to it. And while he'd been on bail awaiting trial, he'd been on a curfew, so he wasn't able to do any graft to earn a few bob to tide Denny and the kids over if he did go down. Carlton was actually living in Brentwood with Denny, but giving his mum and dad's address in East Ham. Now he was convicted, he had to make sure he stayed at the address he'd given to the court, so he wasn't able to be with Denny and the kids, knowing he soon might be going away for a little prison stretch. Carlton had to sign on at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. every day. It drove him fucking mad. Effectively, Carlton couldn't go out after dark, so on a couple of nights, he got a mate, same size, same shape, to sleep round at his while he went out clubbing. If the old bill did come in and check, they'd be told Carlton was tucked up in bed, and if they looked closer, they'd see someone snuggled down under the sheets, giving a passable impression of Carlton Leach, right down to the noisy snoring. It was the longest 4 weeks of his life. Carlton was certain that he was going away. When the day finally came for him to go and face the judge again, he had a bag packed and had said his goodbyes to a tearful Denny. The judge asked him again if he was pushing the drugs. Carlton said no. He made it clear he didn't believe one word. It was like the cell door clanging shut behind him. But one thing had become obvious. The judge had read every single character reference that his defence team had supplied. Really read them, not flipped through them in some token gesture. "Stand up, Mr. Leach. He's going to sentence you to 9 months imprisonment." Carlton heard Denny cry out in the public gallery. The judge paused, then continued, "This will be suspended for 2 years. You will also pay a fine of £500 and £250 towards the court's costs. That pause was only seconds, but it seemed like an eternity. Carlton thinks that's their way of making you suffer a little bit extra. He was mightily relieved at his narrow escape. The case had come in 1988, before the full impact of the rave scene and the ecstasy culture was causing concern amongst the police, public and authorities in general. The pills he had were clean, original MA, uncontaminated by the greed of organised crime that was to have such a devastating consequences in the coming years. Even 6 months to a year later, Carlton felt he would have gone inside for 3 or 4 years. Kids are becoming ill, dying from the effects of ecstasy, and he would have become a scapegoat for the whole culture that he had once believed in. Carlton actually couldn't believe his good luck in escaping a jail sentence, so he was back to work straight away. The next night, him and Vince got a job from a well-known East End villain to guard a big warehouse full of toys and electrical goods, which he thought was going to be broken into by a rival firm. They were tooled up with baseball bats, ready for anyone who came through the doors or windows. The night passed quietly. No sign of any intruders, so Carlton set off home to Brentwood in the early hours, looking forward to a nice kip. 4 minutes from home, bang. Carlton had this horrific crash that he mentioned before. Carlton couldn't believe it. In a matter of 48 hours, he'd escaped a prison sentence by the skin of his teeth. And now he was in traction in Harold Wood Hospital with bones sticking out of his legs and pain like he could never imagine in 7 Sorts of Hell. Fickle fate or what? Carlton remembers nothing of the crash. His memory's completely blank. Did Carlton fall asleep? He doesn't know. He hit another car head on, but he doesn't know to this day who was to blame. That was the way his life went. One moment Carlton was counting his blessings, the next he got a kick in the bollocks as a stark reminder of just how unpredictable life could be. About a week after the crash, while he was still in hospital, police launched their biggest ever offensive against organised rave parties and drug suppliers. Apparently there'd been a 12-month undercover operation at the main meeting point for ravers, Echo's Club in the East End. It was there where the scene all came together, the organisers, the illicit radio stations, the venues, the dealers, the DJs, the security, everybody. The cops had targeted a number of people they believed were big players. One of them was a Turkish geezer who just happened to look a lot like him. The cops thought it was him. They were watching the comings and goings at Echoes, taking undercover pictures and video footage, trying to nail the people they believed were behind the rapidly growing rave scene and increasing criminal links. So while Carlton was lying injured in hospital, they steamed in for the big raid. They grabbed the Turkish geezer, had him down on the floor, slapped the handcuffs on, roughed him up a little bit. Then one of the cops said, "Fuck it, this isn't him. This is not Leach." They'd been after him because he'd become a well-known face on the scene, and they'd ended up getting the wrong man. They were livid. Perhaps the crash was a blessing in disguise. After getting away with a suspended on the ecstasy charge a week earlier, any kind of charge related to raves or drugs would have definitely put him away for a long stretch. It didn't seem much of a blessing as Carlton lay in traction for a total of 8 weeks, wondering where the fuck he went from there. Muscle man lying as helpless as a baby. He saw the bloke who'd been duffed up in the Echoes raid a couple of months later. Carlton said, "You took a good hiding for me. I'll always owe you one." It had taken the ambulance and fire crews 2 hours to cut him out of the wreckage of his car. It was one of the closest brushes with death that he'd ever likely to have. The ambulance guys said an older man, someone without his physique, strength and muscle tissue, would not have survived that. The impact broke his fibula. There were 5 other breaks in the same leg. Carlton lost 4 inches in length, which required the broken bones to be stretched back into shape through traction. His nose was broken and needed to be reset. His whole body was black and blue. The seatbelt, said the police, had definitely saved his life. The impact was so violent that the belt had actually cut through his leather jacket like a knife through butter. Carlton knew he had a real battle on his hands now. He was weak and vulnerable, with people coming to visit him, dishing out pity and saying things like, "Can't see you come back from this, Carl." Carlton was determined he would come back. And he really works at it. Every day he pushed himself to the limit, using a walk-in frame, making it to the loo, and feeling like he'd just conquered Mount Everest the first time he made it on his own, had a shit and wiped his own arse. Carlton wasn't dependent anymore, but he had a long way to go. When the simplest things in life are suddenly taken away from you, when you're in a hospital ward, where people are dying of cancer, when the future looks totally bleak, you get a lot of time for reflection. Carlton remembered becoming so low, so depressed, he was crying in the early hours of the morning. Then the guy next to him, who was receiving cancer treatment, was suddenly taken seriously ill. He'd actually become a friend, they had a few jokes, shared the newspapers. Then one day he was wheeled down to the end of the corridor to die. That was the moment Carlton took a good look at himself and said, "Carlton Leach, you've just survived a car crash that you should have died in. You've got a future." He hasn't. He'd been in there 4 weeks when one of those strange quirks of fate happen that make you wonder, what's life all about? A new patient come into the orthopaedic ward. Carlton thought, I know that bloke's face. Then it dawned on him. He'd been the copper at the scene of his crash. He now was having his hip broken in half after being hit by a car himself when he was trying to stop a speeding Volkswagen Beetle. It just drove into him and roared off, leaving him in agony in the road with a broken leg and a broken ankle. They both got chatting in hospital. They were both in the same boat now, so they weren't enemies. He told him that the driver of the other car involved in his crash was a millionaire, a Freemason, and had been playing golf with a police superintendent friend before the crash, and had then been drinking at the golf club until the early hours. Carlton didn't hear anything more about the accident from Essex police. He reckoned he'd already heard his reason why not. Chapter 16, 4 murders and a funeral. It was 6 long months before the police made any real progress in finding Tony's killers, as the proverbial wall of silence fell over gangland. It was 6 months in which Carlton had time to contemplate the magnitude of what had happened in Workhouse Lane, Rettendon, on that bleak December night, and absorb the stark realities of what Tony had become: a drug baron, smuggler, killer, addict, a man running out of control on high-octane fuel. As Carlton stood by his marble headstone in Hornchurch Cemetery, he cursed the day that he joined forces with the likes of Pat Tate and Craig Rolfe. The police breakthrough came on the 15th of May 1996, when Darren Nichols was taken in for questioning about a consignment of cannabis seized from the back of his transit van at his home in Braintree. Police intelligence reports suggested he might be able to provide a vital lead into the hit team that wiped out Tony, Pat and Craig. Like everyone around the drug scene, he'd heard a dozen names stuck up as the possible killers, and he's heard persistent claims that it was a police team that had done it. After all, Tony and his firm had made more enemies than friends over the years, and the permutations were endless. Even the wildest conspiracy theories gained credibility. At that stage, Micky, Steele and Jack Womes weren't on his personal list of suspects. Neither was Darren Nichols, come to that. To him, he was just a bit of low-life scum who floated around at the bottom of the Essex gangland gene pool as the big boys clambered their way to the top. What Carlton didn't know then was that Steele and Womes were already the prime suspects. But Essex Murder Squad detectives had been unable to come up with any hard evidence to slap the murder charges on them. The police file was apparently bulging with information about massive drug deals, double crosses and threats of vengeance, all involving the 3 dead men and the Steele Womes outfit. Customs investigators had been watching all 5 men as well, while speedboat loads of puff were brought into Britain from Amsterdam via Belgium and the English Channel. After the murders, Steele and Womes had apparently returned to normal life with such nonchalance that there were no chinks in their behaviour pattern that would give the cops either positive evidence or any cause for suspicion. That is until Darren Nichols got his collar felt. Although he appeared on the surface to be a two-bit nobody who dabbled in a bit of cannabis, it soon transpired that he was the gangland catalyst whose evidence could be the key to unlocking the Rettendon murder mystery. He'd worked with Tony and his boys, he worked with Steele and Worms, and he knew the lot. He knew about the huge shipments of puff smuggled in from Amsterdam by sea, the consignments flown in from Belgium by light aircraft. He knew the names of drug contacts throughout Britain. He knew who supplied the guns to the villains, including a machine gun sold to Tony and the boys for £300. And most vital of all, he knew whose fingers were on the triggers the night Tony, Pat and Craig were blown away and their corpses left so mutilated that they could only be identified by their fingerprints. Nichols had already been tapped up by a maverick undercover copper who suspected he was deeper into gangland activities than his modest lifestyle suggested, and had put offers to him about sharing the profits of his illicit activities in return for not nicking him. But from what Carlton heard later, Nichols was having nightmares about what he had seen that night and lived in dread of being the next to be bumped off if Steele and Worms deemed him to be the weakest link in their murder conspiracy. Within hours of his arrest, he decided to spill the beans. Word leaked out to the firm that Nichols was about to blow the Essex gangland scene to bits. He started to make statement after statement detailing the criminal enterprises that had made rich men of Tony and his pals. Carlton doesn't include himself in that. At this stage, Carlton hadn't got a pot to piss in, though he knew he would have been in it up to his fucking neck if the deal Tony thought he was into had come off and he'd given him the 30 grand he said he would. The police nicked Steele and Worms and charged them with the triple murders. Nichols was also accused of murder, but knew that by turning supergrass and giving evidence, he'd get a halfpenny sentence and be given a new name, a new life for himself and his family, away from the threat of gangland revenge. During the run-up to the trial, underworld contracts were put out to kill Nichols. Now, the prosecution's key witness, without whom they would have no case, ranging from £100,000 to £250,000. These were threats the cops took very seriously. There were a few people Carlton knew who would have happily bumped off Nichols for that sort of cash, but finding him and his family was the problem. The police had him well and truly tucked away in a safe house out of Essex, guarded by armed police officers and protected by panic buttons, alarms and secret video cameras. His mother and other family members were followed by villains trying to find out where he was hiding out. Friends were offered money to say where he was, and apparently one sharp operator came up with a novel idea of sending a letter to his old address congratulating him on winning a free luxury holiday in Florida in the hope it would draw him out. But the police were monitoring every cough and fart of Nichols 24 hours a day to keep him out of danger. He finally stepped into the witness box at the Old Bailey in September 1997 to give his version of what he said had happened at Rettendon almost 2 years earlier. Carlton went along to the court a couple of times but found it really hard to bear. The picture being painted of Tony as a hard, ruthless killer, a major drug dealer who didn't give a shit about anybody was not the Tony that Carlton knew. He has to be honest though and say that in the 6 months before his death, Carlton had seen glimpses of the monster that drugs are made of him. He knew that Tony and Craig had probably also been involved in the murder of another drug dealer, Kevin Whitaker, whose body was found face down in a ditch near the Big Four plant at Dunton near Basildon in November 1994. There was no marks of violence on his body, but a toxicology report showed that he had cocaine, ecstasy, lignine and ketamine in his bloodstream. And there was enough of each drug to kill him on its own, let alone in this cocktail. But after a police investigation, Whitaker's death was put down to an accidental overdose. The police had looked at the possibility of murder, but couldn't find a scrap of evidence. The file was officially closed. What had really happened, Carlton found out later, was that Tony and Craig thought Whitaker had ripped him off on a drug deal. According to Tony Thompson's very good book on the Rettendon murders, Blogs 19, Tony and Craig captured Whitaker and accused him of stealing a kilo of puff. Tony was supposed to have said, "Like drugs, do ya? Well, then have some more," and injected him with Special K and cocaine and other stuff as he continued the Inquisition. When Whitaker slumped into unconsciousness, he was put into a hire car and driven to Dunton and dragged into a ditch to die. The car, a Vauxhall Corsa, was valeted twice before it went back to the hire company. Carlton was questioning himself about Whitaker's death, but he knew nothing. And even if he had, Carlton doesn't suppose for a minute he'd have told him, because Carlton still believed then that the Tony Tucker he knew was a decent bloke. The jury in Rettendon murder trial took 5 days of deliberation before announcing their verdict. That Micky Steele and Jack Worms were the Essex executioners who'd blown his pals to pieces. Darren Nicholls' evidence had been believed, despite the defence's team attempt to paint him as a fantasist, a Walter Mitty who invented his involvement in big-time crime to mask the reality of his real life as a total non-entity. Steele and Worms got life. Mr. Justice Hidden was scathing as he sentenced them. "You lured them to a quiet farm track and you executed them. They had crossed your path and you showed them no mercy." Darren Nicholls vanished off the face of the earth. His birth certificate and marriage licence have been deleted from all files. His passport details have been withdrawn. His insurance number no longer exists. But what does remain in the Essex underworld is a lingering doubt that the wrong people were put in prison for the Range Rover killings, and that one day there will be another chapter added to this dreadful episode of Murder and Mayhem that may throw new light on this notorious crime. Personally, Carlton wants to shut the door on it forever. He knows just how close he came to propping up a headstone himself. The priorities in his life now are his kids, Carly, Jamie, Jodie, and of course Matty, and Carlton needs to stay around to be there for them when they need him. He worries for them. He knows there are dangers around every corner. He read about pretty girls like Carly falling victim to crimes like date drugging, and he knows that all his good intentions about steering clear of violence will be blown to pieces, and he'd be out there finding the bastards and ripping their fucking throats out. He'll always need to exercise the Carlton Leach brand of justice. It's in him. He hopes people respect him for it. Carly got to know all about the code of respect in his world of muscle when she was 16 years old. He threw a party for her at the warehouse disco, and all his old pals came along to meet her and wish her well. She was wide-eyed with excitement as she saw the birthday cake with £50 notes stuck in the corners, the dozens of teddy bears in all shapes and sizes, the piles of presents, the champagne corks popping, her first real glimpse into the world, and Carlton wondered if it had been a wise choice. And he'd not have worried. She's far too smart to set off down that road, to be lured by the empty promises of gangland and the hollow rewards of criminality. At 19 years of age, she tells him, "Dad, I know where you've been. You're back now, and you always get love and respect from him and the rest of the family, and that's what matters." Carlton knows she means it, but in his heart, he wonders if a day will ever come when he can walk down the street without looking over his shoulder, or whether the family and his remaining good friends will end up shedding tears over his gravestone when the devil casts his net. Well, that brings us to the grand finale, the end of Muscle, the book by Carlton Leach, which turned into the Rise of the Foot Soldier film franchise. I don't know about you, but I've really enjoyed narrating this book for the Terry Stone Connection crew. Now, I've narrated 2 books for you, King of Clubs and Muscle. What book would you like narrated next? Do you want a crime book? Do you want a romantic comedy? Do you want Phantom of the Opera? Do you want Shakespeare? Put your suggestions for the next book you want me to narrate in the comments below, and we will see you on the other side.